Officer James Rutherford stood in the center of City Hall's grand ballroom, 1,000 people staring at him in silence. Television cameras were pointed directly at his face, broadcasting live to every screen in the city. His police dress uniform, worn and faded at the edges, looked shabby under the crystal chandeliers. Beside him sat Titan, his Belgian Malinois, the dog's muscular frame tense as he sensed his partner's distress. On the stage above them, billionaire real estate developer Harrison Blackwell stood at a microphone, his custom Italian suit probably worth more than James made in a year. The man's silver hair was perfectly styled, his smile sharp as a blade. "This," Harrison said, gesturing dismissively at James, "is what our police department has become. Look at him. His uniform is a disgrace. He can barely afford to feed that animal. And yet we're supposed to trust him to protect our city?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cruel, mocking laughter from the city's elite gathered for the mayor's annual charity gala. James felt his face burn with shame. He had been called here to receive a community service award. Instead, he was being humiliated on live television. "Officer Rutherford," Harrison continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "represents everything wrong with our public services. Undereducated, underpaid, desperate. How much would it take to buy you, officer? $1,000, $500? He pulled out his wallet with theatrical flourish. "Here's $200. Why don't you and your mangy dog go buy yourselves something decent to wear and stop embarrassing this city?" He threw the bills. They fluttered down like leaves, landing at James's feet. The cameras zoomed in. Titan growled low, his ears flat against his head. James stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. This was supposed to be his moment. Recognition for 10 years of service, for the drug busts, for the lives saved. Instead, it was his destruction, broadcast to 300,000 people watching live. Harrison Blackwell smiled at the cameras, victorious and cruel. He had no idea that the dog staring at him with intense dark eyes would be the instrument of his complete and utter ruin. He had no idea that in exactly 7 days, Titan would uncover the secret that would cost Harrison everything: his fortune, his freedom, and his power. If this story touches your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the K9 Stories channel, turn on notifications, and share this video so more people believe in justice and loyalty. James Rutherford checked his uniform in the bathroom mirror of City Hall, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The fabric was worn, the shirt underneath pressed but slightly faded from years of washing. It was his dress uniform, reserved for ceremonies and formal occasions. He wore it perhaps twice a year. It had been purchased 10 years ago when he graduated from the police academy, and his salary had never quite allowed for a replacement. "You look fine," he told his reflection, though he didn't quite believe it. In the marble hallway outside, Titan sat perfectly still, his tan and black coat gleaming from the bath James had given him that morning. The Belgian Malinois wore his official K9 vest, his badge number polished and shining. If James looked worn around the edges, at least his partner looked magnificent. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez appeared in the doorway, resplendent in her own dress uniform, which, unlike James's, was new and perfectly fitted. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "Ready for your moment of glory, Rutherford?" "As ready as I'll ever be," James said, managing a smile. "Still can't believe they're giving me the Community Service Award." "You've earned it. 10 years of service, over 300 arrests with Titan, that major drug bust last year that took down the Hernandez cartel distribution network. You're one of the best K9 officers in the state." Sarah's expression turned more serious. "I know money's tight, James. I know this job doesn't pay what it should, but what you do matters. Tonight the city recognizes that." James nodded, feeling a swell of pride despite his nervousness. The Community Service Award was a big deal, presented annually at the mayor's charity gala, attended by the city's elite, broadcast live on local television. For one night, he would be recognized not as just another cop, but as someone who made a difference. They walked together down the ornate hallway toward the grand ballroom. James could hear music and the murmur of a large crowd. Through the open double doors he glimpsed glittering chandeliers, women in expensive gowns, men in tuxedos. This was a world he never inhabited, the world of money, influence, and power. "Officer Rutherford?" A young aide with a clipboard appeared, looking harried. "You're on in 10 minutes. Please wait in the holding area." James was directed to a small room off the main ballroom where other award recipients waited. There was Dr. Helen Morrison, the pediatrician who ran a free clinic. There was Coach Raymond Davis, who'd turned around the failing high school football program and sent 6 kids to college. There was Maria Santos, the community organizer who'd created an after-school program that kept kids out of gangs. All good people doing good work, James thought. He felt honored to be among them. Through the door, he could hear the gala in full swing. The mayor was speaking, his voice amplified through expensive sound systems. There was laughter, applause, the clink of champagne glasses. James's stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. "First award of the evening," the mayor's voice boomed. "The Community Service Award for Public Safety, presented by our generous sponsor, Blackwell Development Corporation, goes to K-9 Officer James Rutherford." This was it. James stood, straightened his worn uniform, and attached Titan's leash. The dog walked beside him with perfect discipline as they entered the ballroom. 1,000 faces turned toward them. Television cameras swiveled, their red recording lights glowing. James walked down the center aisle toward the stage, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding him. The ballroom was decorated like something from a fairy tale. Flowers everywhere, ice sculptures, tables laden with expensive food. He climbed the steps to the stage, Titan trotting beside him. The mayor stood there with his professional smile, holding a plaque. But it wasn't the mayor who caught James's attention. It was the man standing beside him. Harrison Blackwell. James recognized him immediately. Everyone in Riverside City knew Harrison Blackwell. The billionaire developer had transformed the city's skyline with his buildings, his name on half the commercial properties downtown. He sat on the city council, donated millions to political campaigns, and was treated like royalty wherever he went. He was also, James knew from personal experience, an arrogant bastard who believed his money made him above the law. James had once tried to ticket one of Blackwell's construction trucks for blocking a fire hydrant. The driver had laughed in his face and told him Harrison Blackwell didn't pay parking tickets. When James insisted, he'd received a call from his own captain telling him to drop it. Now Harrison stood on stage, looking down at James with those cold blue eyes, a slight smile playing on his lips. Something in that smile made James's instincts scream warning. "Officer Rutherford," the mayor said warmly, shaking James's hand. "On behalf of the city, I want to thank you for your 10 years of dedicated service. Your work with the K-9 unit has made our streets safer and our community stronger." Applause filled the ballroom. James felt himself relax slightly. This was good. This was the recognition he'd hoped for. The mayor continued. "Your recent work in taking down the Hernandez cartel distribution network resulted in the largest drug seizure in city history. 40 kilograms of cocaine, 15 kilograms of heroin, and the arrests of 23 individuals. Outstanding work." More applause. James noticed the cameras zooming in, capturing his face for the live broadcast. He tried to smile, tried to look worthy of the praise. "Mr. Blackwell," the mayor said, turning to the billionaire, "as tonight's sponsor, would you like to present the award?" "I would, thank you." Harrison's voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of contempt that James didn't think anyone else noticed. Harrison took the plaque from the mayor and held it, but didn't hand it to James. Instead, he stepped to the microphone. "You know," Harrison said, his smile widening, "when I agreed to sponsor tonight's awards, I was expecting to honor true excellence. People who have achieved something remarkable despite the odds. People who've made something of themselves." James felt the first trickle of unease. Beside him, Titan shifted, his ears flicking forward with attention. "But looking at Officer Rutherford here," Harrison continued, his eyes raking over James's worn uniform with obvious disdain, "I have to ask, is this really the best our police department has to offer?" The ballroom went quiet. James felt 1,000 eyes on him. Saw the camera still recording, still broadcasting live to the entire city. I mean, look at him, Harrison said, gesturing dismissively. His uniform is a disgrace, worn, faded, clearly hasn't been replaced in years. He can barely afford to dress himself properly, and yet we're supposed to trust him to protect our city? James's face burned. He wanted to sink through the floor, to disappear. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not on live television. Mr. Blackwell? The mayor started, but Harrison talked over him. And that dog, Harrison said, looking at Titan with disgust. Probably costs more to feed than the officer makes in a month. Is this what we're celebrating? Poverty? Desperation? The fact that our public servants are so underpaid they look like homeless people when they put on their dress uniforms? Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people looked uncomfortable, but others, the wealthy elite in their designer clothes and expensive jewelry, were nodding, smiling, clearly enjoying the spectacle. James stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to defend himself. This was being broadcast live. 300,000 people were watching him be humiliated on television. Officer Rutherford represents everything wrong with our public services, Harrison continued, warming to his theme now, playing to the cameras. Undereducated? What is it, James? Associate's degree? Couldn't afford a real college education? Underpaid because, let's be honest, the job isn't that difficult. And desperate enough that I have to wonder about his integrity. That's enough, Lieutenant Martinez's voice cut through the room. She had appeared at the edge of the stage, her face tight with fury. Mr. Blackwell, you're out of line. Am I? Harrison turned to her, his smile sharp. I'm simply being honest. We're all thinking it. Look at him. He's an embarrassment. How much would it take to buy you, Officer Rutherford? How much would it take to get you to look the other way? He pulled out his wallet, expensive leather, probably cost more than James's monthly rent, and made a show of counting bills. $1,000? Too much? How about 500? Harrison's voice was mocking, cruel. No? Here's $200. Why don't you and your mangy dog go buy yourselves something decent to wear and stop embarrassing this city on live television? He threw the bills. They fluttered through the air in slow motion, each one a dagger to James's dignity. They landed at his feet, scattered across the polished stage floor. The ballroom erupted. Some people gasped in shock. Others laughed, actual laughter at his humiliation. The camera zoomed in on the money at James's feet, on his face burning with shame, on Titan who had started growling low in his throat. James stood there, trembling with rage and humiliation, unable to move, unable to speak. His mind was blank except for the roaring sound of his world collapsing around him. Officer Rutherford, Harrison said, his voice now dripping with false sympathy. I don't mean to be cruel, I'm simply being honest. You're a good man doing his best with limited capabilities. But this award, he held up the plaque, this is for excellence. And I'm sorry, but you simply don't qualify. He set the plaque down on the podium, not handing it to James, making it clear he didn't deserve it. Lieutenant Martinez was on stage now, her hand on James's arm. Come on, we're leaving. But James couldn't move. He was staring at Harrison Blackwell, seeing the cruel satisfaction in those cold blue eyes, seeing the smirk on his face. This man had just destroyed him in front of the entire city, had humiliated him, mocked his poverty, questioned his integrity, all while cameras broadcast it live. James, come on, Sarah said more urgently. Titan was still growling, his body tense, every instinct telling him his partner was threatened. James put his hand on the dog's head, the familiar touch grounding him. Heel, he whispered, his voice barely working. Together, they walked off the stage. The crowd parted for them, some faces sympathetic, others amused, all of them staring. James kept his eyes forward, his hand on Titan's collar, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Behind them, Harrison's voice continued. I apologize for the disruption, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on to celebrating actual excellence, shall we? Laughter and applause followed James out of the ballroom. He made it to the hallway before his legs gave out. He slumped against the marble wall, breathing hard, his vision swimming. Sarah was there, her hand on his shoulder, her face fierce with anger. "That bastard," she said, "that absolute bastard. James, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was going to." "It was live," James said, his voice hollow. "That was broadcast live. Everyone saw. Everyone heard. We'll file a complaint. We'll sue for defamation. He's a billionaire, Sarah. He has armies of lawyers. What do I have?" James looked up at her, feeling the full weight of his powerlessness. "I have a 10-year-old uniform and a dog. That's it. That's all I have." His phone was already buzzing in his pocket. Texts, calls, notifications exploding. The video was already spreading, he knew. By morning, it would be everywhere. Titan pressed against his leg, whining softly. James buried his hand in the dog's fur, the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted on its axis. "I can't go back in there," he said. "I can't face them." "You don't have to," Sarah said. "Come on. I'll drive you home." They left through a side entrance, avoiding the main doors where reporters were already gathering, having watched the broadcast and smelled blood in the water. Sarah's car was in the parking garage, and they made it there without being seen. The drive to James's apartment was silent. Sarah tried several times to start a conversation, to offer comfort, but James couldn't respond. His mind kept replaying the scene. Harrison's mocking voice, the money fluttering to the ground, the laughter of the crowd. When they pulled up to his building, a modest 4-story complex in a working-class neighborhood, Sarah finally spoke. "James, listen to me. What happened tonight was wrong. Deeply, horribly wrong. Harrison Blackwell is a cruel, arrogant man who gets off on belittling people he considers beneath him. But you are not beneath anyone. You're a good officer. A great officer. Don't let him take that from you." "He took it on live television," James said quietly, "in front of 300,000 people. Screw those 300,000 people. The people who matter, your fellow officers, the people you've helped over the years. They know who you really are." James wanted to believe her, but he knew how the world worked. By tomorrow morning, he would be a joke. The poor cop humiliated by the billionaire, a meme, a cautionary tale. He climbed out of the car, Titan jumping down beside him. "Thanks for the ride, Lieutenant." "James, I'll be fine. I just need some time." He wasn't fine. He knew it. She knew it. But what else was there to say? His apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Small, clean, sparsely furnished. One bedroom, barely enough room for a couch, a TV, a small kitchen table. His entire life fit into 600 square feet. James changed out of his uniform carefully, hanging it in the closet even though he never wanted to see it again. He pulled on jeans and a t-shirt and sat on his couch, staring at nothing. Titan brought his food bowl over, dropping it at James's feet with a meaningful look. Right, the dog needed to eat. James forced himself to stand, to pour kibble into the bowl, to fill the water dish. Titan ate with his usual enthusiasm, untroubled by billionaires or humiliation or the collapse of his partner's world. James's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He finally looked at it and immediately wished he hadn't. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. "Billionaire destroys cop on live TV" had already been viewed 2 million times. The comments were brutal. "Poor guy looks homeless, lol. Blackwell is savage. Why are we paying cops if they can't even afford clothes? That dog is better dressed than the cop." But there were other comments too. "This is cruel. That officer didn't deserve that. Harrison Blackwell is a bully. This is what's wrong with wealth inequality." James closed the app. He didn't want support any more than he wanted mockery. He just wanted to disappear. He lay down on his couch, Titan curling up on the floor beside him, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would have to go to work, face his fellow officers, endure their pity or their laughter or their awkward attempts at sympathy. Tomorrow, he would have to exist in a world where everyone had seen him humiliated. But tonight he just lay there in the darkness, his hand resting on Titan's head, and tried not to think about Harrison Blackwell's mocking smile. He had no idea that in that same moment, Harrison Blackwell was in his penthouse apartment, laughing with his wife about the little show he'd put on. He had no idea that tomorrow, on a routine patrol near the waterfront, Titan would detect something that would begin Harrison's downfall. He had no idea that the dog lying quietly beside him, loyal and patient, would be the instrument that brought a billionaire to his knees. Justice was coming. It just happened to have 4 legs and a badge. James woke to the sound of his phone ringing. Sunlight streamed through his apartment window, and for a confused moment, he thought it was a normal day. Then memory crashed back. The gala, Harrison Blackwell, the humiliation broadcast to the entire city. His phone showed 15 missed calls, all from the same number, the police department main line. He answered. Rutherford. Officer Rutherford, this is Captain William Drake. I need you in my office at 0900 hours. Don't be late. The line went dead before James could respond. He checked the time. 7:30. He had 90 minutes to shower, feed Titan, and get to the precinct. He felt hollowed out, exhausted, despite having slept for nearly 10 hours. The shower helped, the hot water washing away some of the previous night's shame. When he emerged, Titan was waiting by the door with his leash in his mouth, tail wagging. The dog had no concept of billionaires or viral videos or public humiliation. He just knew it was morning, which meant work, which meant the thing he loved most in the world. Yeah, boy, James said, managing a small smile. Let's go. The drive to the K9 unit headquarters took 20 minutes through morning traffic. The facility was an aging concrete building in the industrial district, home to 12 K9 teams that served the entire city. It was underfunded, understaffed, and essential. James parked his ancient pickup truck and walked toward the building, Titan trotting beside him. The other K9 officers were already arriving for the morning briefing. James saw their faces change when they noticed him. Sympathy, embarrassment, awkward uncertainty about what to say. Officer Mike Torres approached, his German shepherd, Bruno, sniffing greetings with Titan. Hey man, I saw what happened. That was messed up. Yeah, James said, not wanting to discuss it. Blackwell's an asshole. Everyone knows that, don't let it get to you. But it already had. James could see it in everyone's eyes, the pity, the second-hand embarrassment. He was now the guy who got destroyed by a billionaire on live TV. That would define him forever. Lieutenant Martinez was waiting in the briefing room, her expression carefully neutral. Morning, everyone. Let's get started. The briefing covered the usual: patrol routes, ongoing investigations, updates on suspects they were tracking. James tried to focus, but he kept noticing the glances, the whispers. Even here, among his own people, he was now an object of pity. After the briefing, Lieutenant Martinez called him into her office. Captain Drake wants to see you at 0900. I wanted to give you a heads up. This isn't disciplinary. The department is on your side. Then why does he want to see me? James asked. Damage control. The video has over 10 million views now. The media is calling it everything from class warfare to billionaire bullying. The department needs to respond appropriately. James felt sick. I just want to do my job. I know, and you will. But you need to get through this meeting first. Sarah's expression softened. James, I meant what I said last night. You're a good officer. Don't let Harrison Blackwell take that from you. At exactly 9 o'clock, James stood outside Captain Drake's office. The captain was a large man in his 50s, career law enforcement, respected but intimidating. James had spoken to him perhaps 5 times in 10 years. Come in, Rutherford. James entered. Captain Drake sat behind his desk, and beside him sat a woman James didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, expensive suit. A lawyer, James guessed. Officer Rutherford, this is Catherine Walsh from the city attorney's office. We've asked her here to discuss the incident last night. What incident? James asked carefully. I didn't do anything wrong. No, you didn't, Catherine said. But Harrison Blackwell did. What he did last night constitutes public humiliation, possible defamation, and creates liability for the city. We're exploring legal options. James blinked. Legal options? A lawsuit, Captain Drake said bluntly, against Blackwell personally and his corporation, for defamation, emotional distress, and damage to your professional reputation. James stared at them. You want me to sue Harrison Blackwell? The billionaire with 100 lawyers on retainer? We want you to consider it, Catherine said. The video speaks for itself. He made false implications about your integrity and competence in front of 1,000 people in a live television audience. That's textbook defamation. He'll bury me in legal fees, James said. Not if the city backs you. We would provide legal representation at no cost to you. This isn't just about you, Officer Rutherford. It's about the way wealthy individuals think they can treat public servants. It's about accountability. James thought about Harrison's mocking smile, the money thrown at his feet, the laughter of the crowd. Part of him wanted revenge. Wanted to see that smug bastard held accountable. But another part of him just wanted it to be over. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Take a few days. In the meantime, I want you to know the department stands behind you 100%. Captain Drake's expression was stern but sincere. What Blackwell did was unconscionable. You're a decorated officer with a spotless record. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Thank you, sir. James left the office feeling strange. Not better exactly, but less alone. The department was backing him. That counted for something. He spent the rest of the morning on patrol with Titan, driving through their assigned district in the city's south side. It was mostly routine, checking businesses, maintaining visibility, responding to minor calls. The work was familiar and grounding. Around noon, dispatch called. Unit 12, we've got a report of suspicious activity at the old Miller warehouse on Waterfront Drive. Can you check it out? Unit 12 responding, James replied. Waterfront Drive ran along the city's industrial waterfront, an area of old warehouses and new construction. Harrison Blackwell's massive waterfront development project was happening there. A billion-dollar complex of luxury condos, shops, and restaurants that was supposed to revitalize the area. James pulled up to the Miller warehouse, an abandoned brick building scheduled for demolition to make way for Blackwell's project. A homeless encampment had formed nearby, and that was probably what triggered the call. He got out with Titan scanning the area. The warehouse looked deserted. But Titan's behavior immediately changed. The dog's ears shot forward, his body went rigid, and he started sniffing the air intensely. What is it, boy? James asked. Titan pulled toward the warehouse, not his usual disciplined walk, but an urgent pull. James recognized the behavior. Titan had detected something. The dog was trained primarily for narcotics, but he could also detect explosives and human remains. Search, James commanded, giving Titan more leash. The dog took off, nose to the ground, tracking something with absolute focus. They rounded the warehouse to the water side where a chain-link fence separated the property from the waterfront development construction site. Titan stopped at a drainage pipe that emptied into the water. The dog sat, alert position. Target found. James approached carefully, looking at the drainage pipe. It was large, industrial grade, and appeared to be actively flowing. Dark liquid trickled from it into the harbor water. The smell hit him. Chemical, acrid, wrong. This wasn't normal runoff. James pulled out his phone and took photos, then called it in. Unit 12 to dispatch. I need environmental services at my location. Possible illegal dumping into the harbor. Copy that, Unit 12. Environmental services is en route. While he waited, James walked the perimeter of the fence, Titan still alert and focused. Through the chain link, he could see the construction site. Massive cranes, partially built structures, construction vehicles, and everywhere signs reading, Blackwell Development Corporation. The environmental inspector arrived 40 minutes later, a young man named Daniel Park, who looked fresh out of college. He took one look at the drainage pipe and his expression turned serious. That's not supposed to be there, Daniel said. This drainage system was sealed off 2 years ago as part of the waterfront cleanup project. Can you test it? James asked. Daniel pulled out testing equipment and took samples of the liquid, dipping test strips into the flow. His face went pale. This is bad. Really bad. I'm reading extremely high levels of heavy metals, chemical solvents, possibly benzene. He looked at James. This is toxic waste. Industrial grade. Someone's illegally dumping into the harbor. From where? James asked, though he already suspected. Daniel pointed through the fence at the Blackwell construction site. Has to be from there. That's the only industrial activity in this area. I need to report this immediately. This is a major environmental violation. James felt something click in his mind. How long would you say this has been flowing? Daniel examined the drainage area. Based on the staining and buildup? Months. Maybe longer. And what would this kind of contamination do to the water supply? Riverside Harbor feeds into the city's reservoir system downstream. Contamination at this level could affect drinking water, marine life, anyone who has contact with the water. Daniel was already on his phone making calls. James stood there, Titan sitting calmly beside him, and felt the pieces assembling. Harrison Blackwell's billion-dollar development, illegal toxic waste dumping. Contamination of the city's water supply. Harrison had cut corners to save money, had dumped industrial waste rather than pay for proper disposal, had poisoned the water supply of the same city where he lived like royalty, and Titan had found it. Over the next 2 hours, the scene transformed. More environmental inspectors arrived, then representatives from the EPA, then city officials. The drainage pipe was photographed, tested, documented. The construction site was shut down pending investigation. Lieutenant Martinez arrived personally, her face grim. James, this is massive. If that contamination has been flowing for months like they think, we're talking about a public health crisis. It all leads back to Blackwell's construction site, James said. I know. EPA is getting a warrant to search the site. They want Titan there. For what? If they've been dumping toxic waste, there has to be a storage or transfer point somewhere on site. Titan can detect chemicals. He might be able to find it. 2 days later, James and Titan were part of a massive multi-agency operation. Federal EPA agents, state environmental police, city inspectors, and K-9 units converged on the Blackwell waterfront development construction site, with warrants in hand. Harrison Blackwell himself appeared, flanked by lawyers, his face twisted with fury. When he saw James, his expression turned even darker. You, Harrison snarled. This is harassment. This is revenge because your feelings got hurt. This is a federal investigation into illegal toxic waste dumping, EPA Special Agent Linda Morrison said calmly. Stand aside, Mr. Blackwell. I'll have your badge, Harrison hissed at James. I'll destroy you even more thoroughly than I already have. James said nothing. He just unclipped Titan's leash and gave the command. Search. Titan took off across the construction site, nose working, completely focused. James followed, along with Agent Morrison and a team of inspectors. The dog moved with purpose, checking various areas, dismissing some, investigating others more thoroughly. Then Titan stopped at a semi-trailer parked in a far corner of the site, hidden behind stacks of construction materials. The dog sat, alert position. Target found. Here, James called. Agent Morrison approached with bolt cutters, breaking the lock on the trailer. She pulled the door open, and even from 10 feet away, the chemical smell was overwhelming. Inside were dozens of barrels, industrial containers, all labeled with hazardous material warnings. Toxic chemicals, industrial solvents, heavy metals, all the waste from the construction process that should have been properly disposed of at certified facilities. Instead, it had been dumped into the harbor. Photograph everything, Morrison ordered. Get samples. I want documentation on every single barrel. Harrison appeared, his lawyers trying to hold him back, but he pushed through. When he saw the trailer's contents, his face went ashen. I didn't know about this, he said quickly. This must be my contractors. I'll fire them immediately. I had no knowledge. Save it for the investigation, Mr. Blackwell, Morrison said coldly. We'll be examining all your records, all your communications, all your financial transactions. If you ordered this, we'll find out. Over the following days, the investigation expanded. Medical records were pulled, showing a spike in certain illnesses in the waterfront neighborhoods over the past 6 months. Children with respiratory problems, adults with mysterious skin conditions, 3 elderly residents who had died from what doctors had attributed to natural causes, but might have been contaminated water. The media descended like locusts. The same channels that had broadcast James's humiliation now ran constant coverage of the Blackwell toxic dumping scandal. And the video from the gala resurfaced, but now with new context. News anchors played Harrison's mocking speech, then cut to footage of the toxic waste barrels, the contaminated water, the sick children. "This is the man who called a decorated police officer an embarrassment," one news anchor said. But Officer James Rutherford and his K-9 partner Titan just uncovered what may be the largest environmental crime in city history. Public opinion shifted like a tidal wave. Suddenly, James wasn't a joke anymore. He was a hero. The poor cop who'd been humiliated by a billionaire had brought down that same billionaire's criminal empire. His phone rang. Catherine Walsh, the city attorney. "Officer Rutherford, we need to talk. Harrison Blackwell's lawyers have reached out. They want to settle the defamation suit before you even file it." "Settle?" James asked. "They're offering $2 million and a public apology. They want this to go away." James thought about it. $2 million would change his life completely, would erase every financial worry he'd ever had. "No," he said. "No?" Catherine sounded surprised. "I don't want his money. I want him held accountable for the dumping, for the people who got sick, for the people who died. That's what matters." There was a pause. Then Catherine said, "You're a good man, Officer Rutherford. Rare to find someone who can't be bought." "Harrison asked me how much it would take," James said quietly. "The answer is there isn't enough money in the world." The investigation continued to expand. Federal prosecutors got involved, state environmental agencies, the EPA's criminal division. What started as an illegal dumping case grew into something much larger, because the more they dug, the more they found. Construction permits that had been approved despite clear safety violations, environmental impact reports that had been falsified, city inspectors who had been paid to look the other way, a web of corruption that stretched through city government, with Harrison Blackwell at the center of it all. James and Titan continued their normal patrols, but they were constantly called in to help with the investigation. Titan's nose was invaluable. The dog found 3 more illegal dumping sites connected to Blackwell properties, each one documented and added to the growing criminal case. One evening, James was called to Lieutenant Martinez's office. She looked exhausted, but energized. "The EPA just arrested Vincent Calabrese," she said. "The contractor who handled Blackwell's waste disposal. He's facing 20 years federal prison time. His lawyer contacted the prosecutors within an hour. He wants a deal." "Will they give him one?" James asked. "If he testifies against Blackwell." "Absolutely. This is bigger than one contractor, James. This is about bringing down a corrupt system." Sarah smiled. "And you started it all. You and that amazing dog of yours." James looked down at Titan, who was lying on the floor, chewing contentedly on a toy someone had given him. The dog had no idea he'd just brought down a billionaire. He was just happy to be with his partner, doing the work he was born to do. "He's a good boy," James said softly. "The best," Sarah agreed. That night, James sat in his small apartment and turned on the news. The anchor was reporting live from outside Harrison Blackwell's office building. "Sources tell us that federal prosecutors are preparing to file criminal charges against Harrison Blackwell within the week. Charges being considered include illegal toxic waste dumping, conspiracy, bribery of public officials, and reckless endangerment. If convicted on all counts, Blackwell could face up to 40 years in prison." The screen showed footage of Harrison being swarmed by reporters, his lawyers pushing through the crowd. He looked nothing like the confident billionaire who had humiliated James 2 weeks ago. He looked scared. James's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he opened it. "You've destroyed me. I hope you're proud. HB. James stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed a reply. I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself. I just found the evidence. He hit send and blocked the number. Titan brought his food bowl over, dropping it meaningfully at James's feet. Time for dinner. The dog's life was simple. Eat, work, play, sleep. He didn't care about billionaires or corruption or justice. But he had delivered all three anyway. James fed his partner, then sat on his couch with Titan's head in his lap. His phone kept buzzing, interview requests, calls from reporters, messages from old friends he hadn't heard from in years. He ignored all of them, because tomorrow was a work day. Tomorrow he and Titan would be back on patrol, doing the job they'd always done. The only difference was that now, when people saw him, they wouldn't see the poor cop who got humiliated. They would see the officer who couldn't be bought, couldn't be silenced, and who had brought down one of the most powerful men in the city, all because his dog had the best nose in the state and the courage to follow where it led. The arrest of Vincent Calabrese broke the dam. Within 48 hours of his lawyer contacting federal prosecutors, Calabrese was singing like a canary, desperate to save himself from decades in federal prison. James learned the details from Agent Morrison during a briefing at the FBI field office. He sat in a conference room with representatives from the EPA, FBI, city police, and the district attorney's office, listening to Morrison lay out the scope of what they had uncovered. Calabrese has given us everything, Morrison said, pulling up documents on the large screen. Invoices, emails, recorded phone calls. For the past 3 years, Harrison Blackwell has been running a systematic operation to dump toxic waste from all his construction projects. Not just the waterfront development, all of them. The screen showed a map of Riverside City with red dots marking locations. There were 17 of them. 17 illegal dumping sites, Morrison continued, all connected to Blackwell Development Corporation projects. Calabrese's company would collect the toxic waste. Then instead of taking it to certified disposal facilities, they'd dump it in remote locations, waterways, and abandoned properties. The savings to Blackwell? Approximately $40 million over 3 years. $40 million? District Attorney Robert Chen repeated, his voice tight with controlled fury. He risked public health and safety to save $40 million when he's worth $3 billion? It wasn't about need, Morrison said. It was about greed. Every dollar saved on proper waste disposal was a dollar added to his profit margin, and he didn't think he'd get caught because he had protection. She pulled up another document, a spreadsheet showing payments. Calabrese kept meticulous records because he's not stupid. He knew this could blow up eventually, so he documented everything as insurance. These payments went to city officials in exchange for approved permits, overlooked violations, and falsified inspection reports. James scanned the names on the list and felt his stomach drop. Councilman Richard Torres, Environmental Inspector Dr. Patricia Chen, Building Commissioner Michael Donovan, 3 members of the Zoning Board, and more, a dozen city officials, all on Blackwell's payroll. This is a criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of city government, D.A. Chen said. He looked physically ill. One of the names on the list was his predecessor, the former DA who had retired last year. How deep does this go? We're still investigating, Morrison said. But based on Calabrese's testimony and the documents we've seized, we're looking at RICO charges. This is organized corruption on a massive scale. Lieutenant Martinez spoke up. What about the public health impact? How many people have been affected? Morrison's expression grew darker. We're still determining that. The Department of Health is pulling medical records from the affected areas. Preliminary data show significantly elevated rates of respiratory illness, skin conditions, and certain cancers in neighborhoods near the dumping sites. We've identified at least 47 people who sought medical treatment for symptoms consistent with toxic chemical exposure over the past 18 months. 47 people, James said quietly. Because one man wanted to save money. It gets worse, Morrison said. The medical examiner is reviewing death certificates from the past year. We've identified 5 deaths that were attributed to natural causes, but occurred in individuals living near dumping sites who had symptoms consistent with toxic exposure prior to death. The room went silent. 5 deaths. This wasn't just environmental crime anymore. This was potential manslaughter. "We need to move fast," DHN said. "Before Blackwell can destroy more evidence or flee the jurisdiction. What's our timeline?" "Grand jury convenes in 3 days," Morrison said. "We'll present the evidence and request indictments on all conspirators. Arrests will follow immediately." 3 days, Martinez said. She looked at James. "Blackwell's going to know the walls are closing in. He's going to be desperate. You need to be careful." James had been thinking the same thing. A desperate billionaire with everything to lose was dangerous. "What about protective custody?" "I can't order it," Martinez said. "But I strongly recommend you consider it, just until the arrests are made." James thought about it. 3 days in a safe house versus 3 days continuing his normal routine. The smart choice was obvious, but he'd never been one for safe choices. "I'll be careful," he said, "but I'm not hiding." That evening, James returned to his apartment building to find reporters camped outside. They swarmed him the moment he got out of his truck, cameras and microphones thrust in his face. "Officer Rutherford, how does it feel to bring down a billionaire? Did you know about the corruption when Blackwell humiliated you? Is it true 5 people died because of the toxic dumping? Is Titan the hero dog getting any special recognition?" James pushed through them without comment, Titan walking calmly at his side. The dog was used to chaos and completely unfazed by the crowd. They made it into the building and James locked the door behind them, shutting out the noise. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Officer Rutherford, this is Emily Vasquez from Channel 7 News. I know you're not giving interviews, but I'd really like to talk to you. Not about the investigation, about you, your story, who you really are." James hesitated. Emily Vasquez was the reporter who had been most critical of Harrison Blackwell's behavior at the gala. Her editorial pieces had been scathing. "Why?" James asked. "Because the narrative about you has changed twice now," Emily said. "First you were a hero getting an award, then you were a victim of a billionaire's cruelty. Now you're the cop who uncovered massive corruption. But nobody actually knows who James Rutherford is. I'd like to change that." Something in her voice seemed genuine. "No cameras," James said. "Just conversation." "Deal. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., anywhere you want." They agreed to meet at a small diner near James's apartment, a place he'd been eating breakfast at for years. When he arrived the next evening, Emily was already there, younger than he expected, maybe late 20s, with intelligent eyes and a direct manner. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as he slid into the booth. Titan settled under the table, invisible except for his nose resting on James's foot. "I haven't agreed to anything yet," James said. "Fair enough. Can I at least buy you dinner?" Over burgers and coffee they talked. Emily asked about his background, growing up in a working-class family, his father dying in a fire when James was 16, joining the police force to make a difference like his father had. She asked about his training, his career, his partnership with Titan. "You've made over 300 arrests in 10 years, Emily said, consulting her notes. 94% conviction rate. You've received 4 commendations for bravery. You once talked down a suicidal veteran for 6 hours until he agreed to get help. The Hernandez cartel bust you were supposed to be honored for? That operation saved an estimated 200 lives by getting those drugs off the street." James shifted uncomfortably. "I was just doing my job. That's what everyone says about you. Every officer I talk to, every person you've helped over the years. They all say you're just a guy doing his job." "But James, your job is extraordinary. Most people couldn't do what you do." Emily leaned forward. "Harrison Blackwell tried to make you small. He tried to make you seem worthless because you don't have money. But you're worth more than he'll ever be. And I want to tell that story." "Why?" James asked. "What difference does it make?" "Because there are millions of people out there like you. Working hard, living paycheck to paycheck, doing important work that society depends on but doesn't value enough. You represent them, And when Blackwell humiliated you, he humiliated all of them. But you didn't stay down. You kept doing your job with integrity, and that job brought him down. That matters. James thought about all the people who had reached out to him over the past weeks. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, social workers, all of them saying the same thing. You showed them we matter. Okay, he said. Tell the story. Emily's article ran 2 days later, the day before the grand jury was set to convene. It was a deep profile. James's background, his career, interviews with people he'd helped over the years, testimony from fellow officers about his character and dedication. It painted a picture of a man who had chosen service over wealth, integrity over corruption, duty over comfort. The article went viral. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. People commented with their own stories of being looked down on for not having money, of being treated as less than by the wealthy and powerful. James became a symbol again, but this time not of humiliation, of resistance, of the idea that worth isn't measured in dollars, that integrity matters more than wealth, that doing the right thing still counts for something, but symbols make enemies. That night, James was walking Titan around his neighborhood when a black SUV pulled up alongside them. The window rolled down, and a man James didn't recognize leaned out. You should have taken the settlement money, the man said calmly. $2 million and this all goes away. Now it's too late. The SUV sped off before James could respond. He immediately pulled out his phone and called Lieutenant Martinez. They just threatened me, he said, describing the encounter. That's it, Martinez said. You're going into protective custody right now. I'm sending a unit to pick you up. Sarah. That's not a request, James. That's an order. Pack a bag. You and Titan are going to a safe location until the arrests are made tomorrow. 30 minutes later, James was in an unmarked police car being driven to a hotel near the airport. 2 armed officers were assigned to his protection. He spent a sleepless night in a generic hotel room. Titan curled up on the bed beside him, watching the news coverage of what was being called the biggest corruption scandal in city history. The morning of the grand jury convening, James's phone rang. It was Agent Morrison. We have a problem, she said. Dr. Patricia Chen, the environmental inspector who falsified reports for Blackwell. She's in the hospital. Her daughter got sick 3 days ago. Respiratory failure. The doctors just confirmed it's chemical poisoning from contaminated water in their neighborhood. James felt ice in his stomach. Her own daughter? Patricia Chen lives in one of the waterfront neighborhoods affected by the dumping. She was taking bribes to overlook contamination that poisoned her own child. She's devastated and she's ready to testify against everyone. She's giving us everything. Recordings of conversations with Blackwell. Documentation of the bribery scheme. Names of everyone involved. How's the daughter? James asked. Critical but stable. She's 8 years old. Nicole Chen. Morrison's voice was tight with controlled anger. Patricia Chen poisoned her own daughter for money. She has to live with that. But her testimony will seal the case against Blackwell. The grand jury session lasted 6 hours. James wasn't present, but he received updates throughout the day. Calabrese testified. Patricia Chen testified via video link from the hospital, her daughter in intensive care 1 floor above her. EPA agents presented evidence of the dumping. FBI agents presented evidence of the bribery and corruption. Medical examiners testified about the deaths. At 4 p.m., the grand jury returned indictments. Harrison Blackwell. 47 counts including racketeering, illegal toxic waste dumping, bribery, conspiracy, reckless endangerment, and criminally negligent homicide. Councilman Richard Torres. 23 counts including bribery, conspiracy, and abuse of office. Vincent Calabrese. 31 counts including illegal dumping and conspiracy, and 7 other city officials, all indicted on various corruption charges. The arrests began at 6 p.m., coordinated across the city. Federal agents, state police, and city detectives moved simultaneously. James watched it on the news from his hotel room. Footage of Harrison Blackwell being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his face ashen, his expensive suit rumpled. The mighty billionaire who had humiliated James in front of the entire city was now doing a perp walk on live television. "Titan," James said softly. "I think we got him, boy." The dog's tail wagged, though he had no idea what James was talking about. He just knew his partner was happy, and that made him happy. James was cleared to return home that evening. When he pulled up to his building, there was a crowd waiting, neighbors, people from the community, reporters. They erupted in applause when they saw him. "Officer Rutherford, you're a hero. You brought them all down. Thank you for caring about us." James made his way through the crowd, overwhelmed by the support. An elderly woman grabbed his hand. "My grandson was sick," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The doctors didn't know why. Now they know. He was poisoned by that man's greed. Thank you for finding the truth. Thank you for caring." James didn't know what to say. He just squeezed her hand and nodded. Inside his apartment, he collapsed on his couch, exhausted. His phone showed hundreds of messages, interview requests, job offers, people wanting to thank him, people wanting to meet Titan. There was one message that stood out. From Catherine Walsh, the city attorney. "James, Harrison Blackwell's legal team contacted me. They want to negotiate a plea deal. But there's something you should know. Blackwell is claiming he had nothing to do with the dumping, that it was all Calabrese acting independently. He's going to fight this. The trial could take years. Are you prepared for that?" James thought about it. Years of legal battles, years of depositions and testimony and appeals, years of his life consumed by this case. But then he thought about Nicole Chen, 8 years old, fighting for her life in a hospital bed because of contaminated water. He thought about the 5 people who had died. He thought about the 47 others who had gotten sick. He thought about every working-class family living in those neighborhoods who had trusted their government to protect them and had been betrayed. He typed a response. "However long it takes. I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, James returned to work. He walked into the K9 unit headquarters expecting things to be awkward, expecting the attention to be overwhelming. Instead, he found his fellow officers had set up a banner. "Welcome back, hero." They applauded when he entered. Lieutenant Martinez stood in front, grinning. "Speech," someone called out. James shook his head. "I don't have a speech. I just did my job. Titan did his job. That's all." "That's all?" Officer Mike Torres laughed. "You brought down a billionaire and exposed corruption at the highest levels of city government. That's a little more than just doing your job." "Titan found the evidence," James said. "I just followed his nose." As if understanding he was being discussed, Titan barked and wagged his tail, drawing laughter from everyone. "Well, Titan's getting a medal," Martinez said. "State K9 Medal of Valor, ceremony next month. And James, the mayor wants to meet with you." "About what?" James asked warily. "To apologize and to offer you a promotion. K9 unit commander, 20% pay raise, leadership position, expanded resources for the unit." James stared at her. "Commander? Sarah, you're the lieutenant. You should—" "I recommended you," Martinez said firmly. "You've earned it. And honestly, after what you just did, the city needs to show they value you. Think about it." James did think about it over the following days. A leadership position meant less time in the field, more administrative work. But it also meant he could improve conditions for all the K9 officers, get better equipment, more funding, better training. He could make a real difference for the next generation of officers and their dogs. He accepted the promotion. But Harrison Blackwell wasn't done fighting. Through his lawyers, he launched the aggressive defense campaign. He claimed he was being scapegoated, that he had no knowledge of the illegal dumping, that Calabrese had acted without authorization. His legal team filed motion after motion, trying to get evidence suppressed, trying to delay the trial. And then came the intimidation. James arrived home one evening to find his apartment door ajar. He immediately drew his service weapon and called for backup, clearing the apartment with Titan. Nothing was stolen. But there was a message, spray-painted on his living room wall in red. "Heroes die too." Police processed the scene, But there were no fingerprints, no evidence of who had broken in, just the threat. "That's it," Lieutenant Martinez said when she arrived. "You're getting round-the-clock protection until the trial. Sarah, I can't live like that for months." "You don't have a choice. Blackwell's desperate. He's looking at 40 years in prison. Desperate men do desperate things." She was right. Over the following week, there were 2 more incidents. Someone slashed the tires on James's truck. Someone left a dead rat on his doorstep with a note, "Your dog is next." When James saw that note, something in him snapped. Threatening him was one thing. Threatening Titan crossed a line. He called Agent Morrison. "I want to testify before the grand jury again. I want to tell them about the intimidation, about the threats. I want to make sure Blackwell doesn't get bail." "He's already been denied bail," Morrison said. "But James, if you testify about the threats, it establishes consciousness of guilt. It shows Blackwell knows he's guilty and is trying to silence witnesses. That's powerful evidence." "Then let's do it," James said. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. James would testify about the break-in, the threats, the intimidation campaign. It would be another nail in Harrison Blackwell's coffin. But first, he had to survive the next 7 days. Because somewhere in the city, Harrison Blackwell's associates were planning their next move, and James Rutherford, the poor cop who refused to be bought, refused to be silenced, and refused to back down, was in their crosshairs. The attack came on a Tuesday evening, 6 days before James was scheduled to testify about the intimidation campaign. He had just finished his shift and was walking Titan through the parking lot behind K9 headquarters. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. There were other officers around, but they were inside the building, wrapping up their own shifts. Titan stopped suddenly, his body going rigid. A low growl rumbled from his chest, his ears flat against his head. James had learned to trust the dog's instincts absolutely. "What is it, boy?" James asked, his hand moving instinctively toward his service weapon. The shot came from the roof of the adjacent building. James heard the crack of the rifle a split second before the bullet hit the pavement where he'd been standing. He'd already moved, pure survival instinct taking over, diving behind a patrol car. Titan was on him instantly, body pressed against James's, the dog's training to protect his partner overriding everything else. Another shot rang out, shattering the patrol car's window above them. Glass rained down. James keyed his radio. "Shots fired. Shots fired at K9 headquarters parking lot. Officer under fire. Shooter on the roof of the industrial building to the east." The response was immediate. Officers poured out of the building, weapons drawn. Sirens began wailing as patrol cars raced toward the location. James stayed down, his body covering Titan even as the dog tried to cover him. If he lost this dog, if anything happened to Titan because of Harrison Blackwell's vendetta. The shooting stopped. James heard footsteps on the roof. The shooter was running. He started to rise, but Titan growled and pushed against him, forcing him to stay down. The dog's instincts were better than his. Another shot rang out, hitting the patrol car's hood. Then police units were flooding the area, officers rushing the building, a helicopter appearing overhead with a searchlight cutting through the gathering darkness. Lieutenant Martinez appeared, crouching beside James. "Are you hit?" "No." "Titan warned me just in time." James ran his hands over the dog, checking for injuries. Titan was fine, alert and protective, but unharmed. "SWAT is clearing the building," Martinez said. "Stay down until we secure the scene." 20 minutes later, SWAT gave the all-clear. The shooter was gone, had escaped through the building and disappeared into the surrounding industrial district. But they found evidence, shell casings from a high-powered rifle, a position that had been prepared in advance with sandbags for stability. This wasn't some random attack. This was a planned assassination attempt. Agent Morrison arrived within the hour, her face grim. "This is a federal case now. Attempted murder of a federal witness. James, you're going into full protective custody. No arguments." This time, James didn't argue. Someone had just tried to kill him, had nearly succeeded. If Titan hadn't alerted, if James hadn't moved when he did, he would be dead. They moved him that night to a secure federal facility, a safe house in an undisclosed location. 2 U.S. Marshals were assigned to his protection. Titan came with him, the dog never more than a few feet from his side. The safe house was comfortable but sterile, a suburban home in a quiet neighborhood, completely ordinary on the outside, completely secure on the inside. Reinforced doors, security cameras, armed guards and an unmarked van parked down the street. James sat on the couch, Titan's head in his lap, and tried to process what had just happened. Someone had tried to kill him, had fired a rifle at him in the parking lot of a police station. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. His phone rang. Agent Morrison. "We found the shooter," she said without preamble. Or rather, we know who he is. Facial recognition from security cameras caught him fleeing the building. His name is Derek Vance, former military sniper, dishonorable discharge, currently works as a private contractor. We're tracking him now. "Who hired him?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. "We're working on establishing that connection. But James, there's something else. We searched Vincent Calabrese's office with a new warrant. We found a ledger, a physical book where he kept records of payments. Not just the payments from Blackwell for the illegal dumping. Payments to other people, including $50,000 paid yesterday to a shell company that we've traced to Derek Vance." James felt cold clarity settle over him. Calabrese hired the shooter. On someone's orders. Calabrese is in federal custody. He can't make those kinds of decisions on his own. Someone got a message to him, told him to arrange your death. "Blackwell," James said. "That's our working theory. But we need proof. We're monitoring all of Blackwell's communications from jail, but he's smart. He uses his lawyer visits to pass messages, and those are privileged. We can't access them without proof the lawyer is actively participating in the conspiracy." James thought about Harrison Blackwell sitting in a jail cell, still pulling strings, still trying to destroy anyone who threatened him. The man's arrogance was breathtaking. "What about Calabrese?" James asked. "Will he talk?" "His lawyer is already calling us. He wants another deal. He's terrified that if he doesn't cooperate, he'll be the next target. Blackwell is cleaning up loose ends." Over the next 2 days, the case exploded open again. Vincent Calabrese, facing a potential murder conspiracy charge on top of his environmental crimes, gave prosecutors everything. He confirmed that he'd received instructions through Blackwell's lawyer to handle the police problem. He provided documentation of the payment to Derek Vance. He gave them names of other people Blackwell had paid to intimidate witnesses. And then came the biggest breakthrough. Patricia Chen, the environmental inspector whose daughter had been poisoned by the contaminated water, had been cooperating with investigators from her daughter's hospital bedside. Nicole Chen was slowly recovering, the doctors cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. And Patricia, consumed by guilt and rage at what her corruption had cost her own child, had kept evidence. Recordings, years of them, every conversation with Harrison Blackwell, secretly recorded on her phone, kept as insurance in case he ever tried to betray her. Agent Morrison played some of them for James in the safe house. Harrison's voice, cold and precise. "I don't care how you do it, Patricia. I need those inspection reports to show acceptable levels. If they don't, this project gets shut down and I lose $200 million. Make it work." Patricia's voice nervous. "But Harrison, the heavy metal contamination is 10 times the legal limit. If people find out, they won't find out unless you tell them. And you won't because I pay you very well to make problems disappear. Now do your job." Another recording more recent from 2 weeks after the dumping was discovered. "The cop who found it, Rutherford, he's not backing down," Patricia said. "The EPA is crawling all over everything. I can't make this go away." "Then we make him go away," Harrison replied. "I have people who handle problems like this. He's just a poor cop. No one will miss him." Morrison paused the recording and looked at James. "That's conspiracy to commit murder," recorded in Harrison's own voice. "He's done." James sat in silence, listening to the man who had humiliated him on live television casually discuss having him killed like he was ordering lunch. The callousness of it was stunning. "When can we arrest him for this?" James asked. We already did, an hour ago. He's being moved to maximum security federal detention. No bail, no visitors except his lawyer, and every conversation with his lawyer is being monitored under the crime fraud exception to attorney-client privilege. He's finished, James. But James knew Harrison Blackwell wouldn't go down without a fight, and he was right. Blackwell's legal team launched an aggressive counterattack. They filed motions to suppress the recordings, claiming they were obtained illegally. They challenged the credibility of Calabrese and Chen, arguing they were criminals trying to save themselves by lying about their client. They demanded the charges be dropped, claiming Blackwell was being politically persecuted. The media covered every development. Public opinion was firmly on James's side. The assassination attempt had erased any remaining sympathy for Blackwell. But the billionaire still had supporters, people who believed wealth equaled innocence, people who thought the whole thing was a conspiracy against successful businessmen. Emily Vasquez from Channel 7 News called James at the safe house. I know you can't talk about the case, she said. But James, there's something you need to know. Blackwell's PR team is running a smear campaign against you. They're digging into your past, trying to find anything to discredit you. Your divorce, your finances, anything they can use. Let them dig, James said. I've got nothing to hide. I know that. But they're also targeting Titan. They're claiming he's aggressive, dangerous, that his alerts aren't reliable. They're trying to undermine the evidence he found. James felt fury rise in his chest. Going after him was one thing. Going after his dog was unforgivable. Titan has made over 200 arrests in 5 years, James said, his voice tight with controlled anger. His track record is spotless. Every single one of his alerts has been verified. They can attack me all they want, but that dog is beyond reproach. I know, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. I'm doing a feature on K-9 officers, their training, their success rates. I'm interviewing handlers from across the state. By the time I'm done, everyone will understand that dogs like Titan don't lie. They can't be bribed. They just do their jobs with perfect integrity. The feature aired 3 days later. It was powerful. Interviews with K-9 handlers, footage of dogs in training, statistics showing the incredible success rates of properly trained K-9 units. And featured prominently was Titan, with his 100% accuracy rate over 5 years, his numerous commendations, his record of service. The public response was overwhelming. Social media flooded with support for K-9 officers. People shared stories of being helped by police dogs. The hashtag, #JusticeForTitan, trended nationally. Harrison Blackwell's attempt to discredit the dog who had found evidence of his crimes backfired spectacularly. But James, sitting in protective custody, couldn't fully enjoy the vindication. Because Derek Vance, the sniper who had tried to kill him, was still at large. Federal marshals were hunting him, but the man was a professional. He knew how to disappear. And James knew that as long as Vance was free, he and Titan were still in danger. The break came from an unexpected source. Patricia Chen's daughter, Nicole, had woken up. The 8-year-old was weak but recovering, and when she was told what her mother had done, both the corruption and the eventual cooperation with investigators, she asked to meet James. She wants to meet the police officer and the dog who saved her, Patricia told Agent Morrison. She knows if you hadn't found the contamination when you did, she might have died. She wants to say thank you. Morrison relayed the request to James. It's your call. The hospital is secure and we can arrange it safely. But I understand if you'd rather not. James thought about an 8-year-old girl fighting for her life because of one man's greed. I'll go, he said. The next day, accompanied by U.S. Marshals and with Titan at his side, James visited Riverside Children's Hospital. Nicole Chen was in a private room, her small frame dwarfed by the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly. Patricia sat beside her, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past weeks. When James entered with Titan, Nicole's face lit up despite her obvious exhaustion. Is that him? She whispered. The hero dog? This is Titan, James said, bringing the dog closer to the bed. He wanted to meet you too. Titan, Sensing the fragile child was incredibly gentle, he rested his chin on the edge of the bed, his dark eyes soft, letting Nicole pet his head with weak hands. "Thank you," Nicole said, her voice barely audible. "Mommy says you found the bad stuff that made me sick, that if you hadn't, I might have died." James felt his throat tighten. Titan found it. He's the hero. I just followed where he led. "But you chose to look," Nicole said with a wisdom beyond her 8 years. "Mommy says the bad man wanted you to stop, but you didn't. You kept looking because you cared about people like me." James glanced at Patricia, who was crying silently, her hand over her mouth. "I'm sorry," Patricia said to James. "I'm so sorry for everything. For taking his money, for lying on the reports, for helping poison my own neighborhood, my own daughter. I have to live with that forever." "But you're making it right now," James said. "Your testimony, your recordings, they're going to put him away for the rest of his life. You're protecting every other child in this city." "It doesn't undo what I did," Patricia said. "No," James agreed. "But it stops him from doing it to anyone else. That matters." They stayed for 20 minutes, Titan never leaving Nicole's side, the dog seeming to understand that this child needed his gentle presence. When they left, Nicole was smiling, her hand resting on the stuffed dog toy that Patricia had bought her. "She's going to be okay," Patricia said at the door. "The doctors say full recovery is possible. She's strong." "Like her mother," James said. Patricia shook her head. "No. If I was strong, I would have said no the first time Harrison offered me money. I was weak. But I'm trying to be strong now." Back at the safe house, James felt emotionally drained. Seeing Nicole, seeing the real human cost of Harrison's greed made everything more real. This wasn't just about corruption or crime. It was about an 8-year-old girl who nearly died because a billionaire wanted to save money. Agent Morrison called that evening with news. "We found Derek Vance. Federal marshals tracked him to a motel outside the city. He's in custody." James felt a wave of relief. "Is he talking?" "Not yet. But we found evidence in his motel room, a burner phone with texts arranging the payment, a photo of you that was obviously provided for the hit, documentation showing the $50,000 transfer. We have him cold on attempted murder. His lawyer is already trying to negotiate a deal." "What kind of deal?" James asked warily. "Testimony against whoever hired him in exchange for a reduced sentence. If he confirms Blackwell ordered the hit, that's another nail in the coffin." Over the next week, the pieces fell into place. Derek Vance, facing life in prison, agreed to cooperate. He testified that he'd been hired through Calabrese but that the order had come from Blackwell. He provided communications that tied directly back to Blackwell's lawyer, who was now under investigation for participating in the conspiracy. Harrison Blackwell's empire was crumbling. His assets were being seized to pay for the environmental cleanup. His buildings were being sold off. His company's stock had become worthless. Business partners were fleeing, distancing themselves from the scandal. And the trial date was set. 3 months away. Federal prosecutors would present the full case: the illegal dumping, the corruption, the bribery, the conspiracy, the attempted murder. All of it. James was told he would be one of the primary witnesses. He would have to take the stand, tell his story, face cross-examination by Blackwell's lawyers. The thought terrified him. But when he mentioned this to Lieutenant Martinez during a secure video call, she just laughed. "James, you faced down a sniper. You brought down a corrupt billionaire and exposed a network of city officials taking bribes. You survived an assassination attempt. And you're worried about testifying?" "Testifying means reliving all of it," James said. "The humiliation at the gala, the threats, everything. In front of cameras, in front of the public. It means being vulnerable." "It also means getting justice," Martinez said. "For Nicole Chen, for the 5 people who died, for every person who got sick because of that contamination. You're their voice, James, you and Titan." She was right. James knew she was right. 2 weeks before the trial, James was finally cleared to leave protective custody. Derek Vance was in jail, unable to make bail. Calabresi was cooperating fully, also in protective custody. Blackwell was in maximum security federal detention with no access to the outside world beyond his lawyer. The immediate threat was over. James returned to his apartment to find it had been cleaned and repaired. The spray-painted threat had been removed. The locks changed. A security system installed courtesy of the police department. His fellow K-9 officers had chipped in to replace his slashed tires. The community had rallied around him. There were flowers and cards from people he'd never met, letters from families thanking him for finding the contamination, drawings from children showing Titan as a superhero. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. But the most meaningful message was a simple card from Nicole Chen. Inside, in a child's handwriting, "Thank you for saving me. You and Titan are my heroes. Love, Nicole." James put the card on his refrigerator, where he would see it every day. The night before the trial began, James couldn't sleep. He sat on his couch with Titan, the dog's familiar weight pressed against his leg, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. A billionaire's cruelty at a gala, a routine patrol near a waterfront, a dog's exceptional nose finding what no human could, an investigation that exposed corruption at the highest levels, an assassination attempt, and now, finally, justice. His phone buzzed. A text from Emily Vasquez. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won. You proved that integrity matters more than wealth, that doing the right thing still counts for something, and that heroes come in all forms, including four-legged ones. Good luck tomorrow." James smiled and texted back, "Thanks, we'll need it." He looked down at Titan, who gazed back at him with those intelligent dark eyes, completely trusting, completely loyal. "Tomorrow we finish this, boy," James said softly. "Tomorrow that man who tried to make us small learns that we're stronger than he ever imagined." Titan's tail wagged, and for the first time in weeks, James felt genuinely hopeful. Justice was coming. And this time, it would not be denied. The federal courthouse was a fortress, security barriers, metal detectors, federal marshals everywhere. Media trucks lined the streets, reporters doing live shots, crowds of people hoping to get inside the courtroom to witness what was being called the trial of the decade. James arrived in an unmarked car with U.S. Marshal protection. Titan walked beside him wearing his official K-9 vest, his badge gleaming. The moment they exited the vehicle, cameras swarmed. Questions were shouted from every direction. "Officer Rutherford, how do you feel about facing Harrison Blackwell? Is Titan going to testify? What do you want to say to Blackwell?" James said nothing, just walked through the crowd with Titan at his side, the dog calm and professional despite the chaos. They entered the courthouse through a side entrance, avoiding the worst of the media circus. Inside, Agent Morrison met them. "The prosecution team wants to brief you one more time before we start. You're our third witness after the EPA scientist and the medical examiner." James nodded, his stomach tight with nerves. He'd testified in court before, but never in anything like this. Never against someone as powerful and vindictive as Harrison Blackwell. The courtroom was massive, wood-paneled and formal, with high ceilings and the seal of the federal court prominently displayed. The gallery was packed. Journalists, city officials, citizens who had won the lottery for public seats. James spotted Emily Vasquez in the press section, Lieutenant Martinez in the row reserved for law enforcement. And then the side door opened, and Harrison Blackwell entered. He was flanked by federal marshals, wearing an expensive suit despite being in custody. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes met James's across the courtroom, something flickered there. Rage, hatred, the promise of vengeance if he somehow escaped this. James stared back, refusing to look away, refusing to be intimidated. He'd faced this man's assassin. He wouldn't flinch from the man himself. The judge entered, Federal Judge Margaret Okonkwo, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for being brilliant and absolutely no nonsense. The bailiff called the court to order and the trial began. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Lead prosecutor David Sherman laid out the entire conspiracy, the illegal dumping, the contaminated water, the The sick children, the deaths, the bribery, the corruption, the attempted murder of a witness. He showed photographs of Nicole Chen in her hospital bed. He showed maps of the dumping sites. He showed the financial records proving Blackwell had saved $40 million by poisoning his own city. Harrison Blackwell is a billionaire, Sherman said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. He could have afforded to dispose of toxic waste properly. He chose not to because he valued money more than human life. 5 people are dead because of that choice. Dozens more are sick. An 8-year-old girl nearly died. And when a dedicated police officer discovered his crimes, Harrison Blackwell tried to have him killed. This trial is about accountability. It's about proving that in America, no one is above the law, not even a billionaire. Blackwell's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gregory Vaughn, countered with an opening statement claiming his client was innocent, that he'd been betrayed by subordinates, that the prosecution's witnesses were criminals trying to save themselves by lying. Harrison Blackwell is a self-made success story, Vaughn said. A man who built an empire through hard work and vision. The prosecution wants to destroy him because he's wealthy, because he's successful, because he represents everything they resent. But success is not a crime. My client trusted the wrong people. Vincent Calabrese, Patricia Chen, and others who betrayed that trust. Harrison Blackwell is not a criminal. He's a victim of those who worked for him. James sat in the witness waiting room and listened to the proceedings via closed-circuit television. The EPA scientist testified about the contamination levels, explaining in technical detail how toxic the dumping had been. The medical examiner testified about the 5 deaths, presenting evidence that they were directly caused by chemical poisoning. Then it was James's turn. He walked into the courtroom with Titan at his side. The dog was allowed as part of James's testimony. K-9 officers and their partners were recognized as a unit. They took their position at the witness stand, James raising his right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Prosecutor Sherman approached with a warm, encouraging expression. Please state your name and occupation for the record. James Rutherford, K-9 officer with Riverside City Police Department, currently serving as K-9 unit commander. And this is your partner? Sherman gestured to Titan. Yes, sir. K-9 Officer Titan, badge number K-47. Sherman led James through his testimony methodically. His background, his training, his 10 years of service. Titan's training and certification, his incredible track record. Then the night of the gala. Officer Rutherford, can you describe what happened at the mayor's charity gala on the night of April 15th? James took a deep breath and began. He described being called to receive the Community Service Award. Described standing on stage while Harrison Blackwell humiliated him on live television in front of 1,000 people and 300,000 viewers. He called my uniform a disgrace, James said, his voice steady despite the painful memories. He questioned my education, my competence, my integrity. He asked how much it would take to buy me, to get me to look the other way. Then he threw $200 at my feet like I was a beggar. How did that make you feel? Sherman asked. Humiliated, worthless. Like everything I'd worked for, everything I'd done meant nothing because I didn't have money. And yet, 2 weeks later, you were the officer who discovered Harrison Blackwell's illegal dumping operation. Can you tell us about that? James described the routine patrol, Titan's alert at the drainage pipe, the discovery of toxic waste flowing into the harbor. He described how Titan's training and exceptional nose had led them to evidence that no human would have found. Titan detected chemicals that were completely odorless to humans, James explained. His nose is estimated to be 10,000 times more sensitive than ours. He could smell the contamination that was being hidden. That's what K-9 officers do. They find what humans can't. Sherman introduced photographs of the drainage pipe, the contamination, the barrels of toxic waste Titan had located at the construction site. Each piece of evidence was damning. Then came the difficult part. James testified about the threats, the break-in, the dead rat left on his doorstep with the note threatening Titan. His voice tightened with controlled anger when he described that. They threatened my dog, James said. Titan has given 5 years of his life to serving this city. He's loyal, brave, and has never done anything except his job. Threatening him crossed a line. And then came the assassination attempt, Sherman said. Please describe what happened. James recounted the evening in the parking lot, Titan's warning, the rifle shots diving for cover. The courtroom was silent except for his voice. People leaned forward, listening intently. If Titan hadn't alerted me, if I hadn't moved when he warned me, I would be dead. James said simply. My dog saved my life. Again. Sherman turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording that was provided by Patricia Chen. The recording filled the courtroom, Harrison's voice cold and precise. The cop who found it, Rutherford, he's not backing down, then we make him go away. I have people who handle problems like this. He's just a poor cop. No one will miss him. The effect was electric. Gasps from the gallery. James saw several jurors' faces harden with disgust. Harrison sat motionless, but his jaw was clenched tight. No further questions, Sherman said. Now came the hard part. Cross-examination. Gregory Vaughn approached James with a predatory smile. Officer Rutherford, you've painted quite a picture of yourself as a victim. But isn't it true that you had a personal vendetta against my client after the gala incident? No, James said firmly. No? You weren't angry that he criticized you in public? Of course I was angry, but that didn't affect my work. I was doing a routine patrol. Titan detected contamination. I followed protocol and reported it. My personal feelings were irrelevant. How convenient that you just happened to find evidence against the man who had humiliated you, Vaughn said with heavy sarcasm. I didn't find anything, James said. My dog did. And dogs don't have vendettas. They just detect what they're trained to detect. Vaughn changed tactics. You're aware that K9 alerts can be subjective? That handlers can unconsciously cue their dogs to alert on command? That's a myth, James said. Titan's training includes double-blind testing. He's alerted to substances when I didn't know they were there. His accuracy rate is 100% over 5 years. Every single alert has been verified by laboratory testing. How convenient that you have a perfect record, Vaughn sneered. It's not convenient. It's professional training and honest work. The cross-examination continued for another hour, Vaughn trying every angle to discredit James's testimony, to paint him as vindictive or dishonest. But James remained calm, answering every question with simple truth. Finally, Vaughn played his trump card. Isn't it true, Officer Rutherford, that you're being paid by the city to testify? That you received a promotion and a 20% raise after this investigation began? I received a promotion based on my work over 10 years, James said. Not because of this case. But you benefited from bringing down my client, didn't you? The poor cop who became famous for taking down a billionaire? You've done quite well for yourself. James met Vaughn's eyes directly. I benefited by doing my job with integrity. If that's a problem in your world, I feel sorry for you. The gallery erupted in applause. Judge Okonkwo gavelled for order, but James saw her hiding a small smile. No further questions, Vaughn said, clearly realizing he'd lost this battle. Over the following weeks, the trial continued. Vincent Calabrese testified, describing years of illegal dumping on Blackwell's orders. Patricia Chen testified from a wheelchair, her daughter Nicole beside her, and told the jury how she'd poisoned her own neighborhood for money. Derek Vance testified about being hired to kill James. EPA agents presented mountains of evidence. Harrison Blackwell took the stand in his own defense, a calculated risk. He was smooth, articulate, denying everything. He claimed he'd been betrayed by subordinates. Claimed the recordings were taken out of context. Claimed he was the real victim of a conspiracy by bitter employees and an officer with a personal grudge. But on cross-examination, Prosecutor Sherman destroyed him. Mr. Blackwell, you're worth $3.2 billion, correct? Approximately, yes. And proper disposal of toxic waste from your waterfront project would have cost approximately $15 million. I don't know the exact figure, but it would have been a tiny fraction of your wealth. Less than 0.5% of your net worth. I suppose. So why didn't you pay for proper disposal? I trusted my contractors to handle it appropriately. Sherman pulled out documents. These are emails from you to Vincent Calabrese, marked as Exhibits 47 through 63. In them, you repeatedly instruct him to minimize disposal costs and find creative solutions for waste management. You knew exactly what he was doing. Those are taken out of context. In Exhibit 59 you wrote, and I quote, "I don't care where it goes as long as it doesn't show up on my expense reports." How is that out of context, Mr. Blackwell? Harrison had no good answer. His carefully constructed defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. James was in the courthouse waiting room with Titan when the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. James took his seat in the gallery, Titan beside him. Lieutenant Martinez sat on one side, Emily Vasquez on the other. The entire K-9 unit had shown up, filling a row in support. Harrison Blackwell was led in, his expensive suit unable to hide the fear in his eyes now. He knew. Everyone knew. Judge Okonkwo took her seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of illegal toxic waste dumping? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the charge of criminally negligent homicide? Guilty. Count after count. 47 charges. 47 times the word guilty rang through the courtroom. Harrison Blackwell sat motionless, his face ashen. His billion-dollar empire, his power, his influence, all of it meant nothing now. He was just another criminal, convicted and headed for prison. When the jury foreman finished, Judge Okonkwo spoke. Mr. Blackwell, you will be remanded into custody pending sentencing. Sentencing is scheduled for 30 days from today. Federal marshals led Harrison away. As he passed James, he stopped, looking at the officer who had brought him down. You destroyed me, Harrison said quietly. I hope you're satisfied. James met his eyes without flinching. I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you faced consequences. Harrison was led away, and James would never see him again. 30 days later, Harrison Blackwell was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. His entire fortune, $3.2 billion, was seized to pay for the environmental cleanup, victim compensation, and criminal penalties. The man who had once owned half the city now owned nothing. But the story wasn't over. Because while Harrison fell, others rose. Nicole Chen made a full recovery and became the face of environmental protection advocacy, speaking at schools about the importance of clean water. Patricia Chen served 2 years in prison for corruption, but emerged dedicated to public service, working for environmental nonprofits. Vincent Calabrese testified against organized crime connections and entered witness protection. And James Rutherford became a symbol of something important, that integrity matters, that doing the right thing counts, that wealth doesn't equal worth. The day after the sentencing, James was called to City Hall. The mayor, a new one, the previous mayor having resigned due to accepting Blackwell's campaign donations, stood at a podium in the grand ballroom, the same ballroom where James had been humiliated. But this time was different. The room was filled with K-9 officers from across the state, law enforcement officials, city leaders, and citizens. News cameras broadcast live, just as they had that terrible night months ago. James stood with Titan, wearing a new dress uniform the department had provided as the mayor spoke. Officer James Rutherford and K-9 Officer Titan represent the very best of public service, the mayor said. When faced with humiliation, they responded with dignity. When threatened with violence, they responded with courage. When offered money to stay silent, they chose integrity. They exposed corruption at the highest levels and held a powerful man accountable. Today, the city of Riverside honors them with our highest recognition. The mayor presented James with the Medal of Valor, the same award Harrison had denied him months ago. But more importantly, she presented Titan with the K-9 Medal of Honor, placing it on his ceremonial collar as the dog sat with perfect discipline. The ballroom erupted in applause. Standing ovation, cameras flashing. But James just looked down at his dog, at his partner, at the incredible animal who had stayed loyal through everything. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "We actually did it." Titan's tail wagged. After the ceremony, Emily Vasquez approached for one final interview. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Standing in the same room where you were humiliated, but this time being honored." James thought about it. "It feels like justice. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel worthless because they don't have money. Harrison Blackwell thought wealth made him untouchable. He learned it doesn't." "What's next for you?" Emily asked. "I go back to work," James said simply. "As K-9 unit commander, I have a lot to do. Training programs to improve, equipment to upgrade, officers to mentor. The work continues." "And Titan?" James looked down at his dog. "Titan's earned a gradual transition to retirement. He'll work part-time, train new K-9s, and spend more time just being a dog. He's earned that." 6 months later, James stood in what used to be Harrison Blackwell's penthouse. The building had been seized and sold, and the new owners had donated the penthouse to be converted into a K-9 training center and memorial to police dogs killed in the line of duty. The space where Harrison had lived in luxury was now dedicated to training the next generation of dogs like Titan. James walked through the facility with Titan at his side, the dog's muzzle grayer now, his movements a bit slower, but his eyes still bright and intelligent. Young K-9 officers stopped to meet him, to shake James's hand, to pet the legendary dog who had brought down a billionaire and exposed massive corruption. "Is it true he found half a dozen illegal dumping sites?" one young officer asked. 7, James corrected with a smile. "And he never missed once. Perfect accuracy, perfect dedication, perfect courage." He scratched behind Titan's ears, and the dog leaned into him with complete trust. That evening, James sat in his apartment, a nicer one now in a better neighborhood, affordable on his commander's salary. Titan was curled up on his dog bed, a premium orthopedic one that helped his aging joints. James's phone buzzed. A text from Nicole Chen, now 9 years old and healthy. "Mr. James, I got an A on my science project about water contamination. My teacher said I should be proud that my story helped change laws. Thank you for saving me. Love, Nicole." James smiled and texted back, "Titan says you're welcome, and I'm proud of you too." He looked at the dog who had saved his life in more ways than one, who had found evidence that brought down corruption, who had warned him of danger, who had stayed loyal through humiliation and threats and assassination attempts. "You're a good boy, Titan," James said softly. "The best boy." Titan's tail thumped against his bed. On the wall, James had framed 3 things. The Medal of Valor he'd finally received. A photo of Titan in his prime, alert and magnificent. And a news clipping with a headline that said it all. "Hero cop and K-9 partner bring down billionaire's criminal empire." But the headline James liked better was the smaller one underneath, from Emily Vasquez's final article, "Integrity Cannot Be Bought, the James Rutherford Story." Because that was the truth Harrison Blackwell had never understood. James couldn't be bought. Not for $200 thrown at his feet. Not for $2 million in settlement money. Not for anything. Some things, honor, integrity, loyalty, doing the right thing, were worth more than all the money in the world. Harrison Blackwell had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. And somewhere in a federal prison, serving year 1 of a 35-year sentence, the former billionaire had a lot of time to think about the poor cop he'd tried to humiliate. The cop who had brought him to justice, with a dog who never gave up, never backed down, and never stopped doing his job with perfect, incorruptible integrity. Justice had been served, and it had 4 legs and a badge. Thank you for watching this story. Subscribe to the K9 Stories channel, write in the comments which city you are watching from, and share this video with someone who loves dogs and believes in justice. Remember that wealth does not equal worth, that integrity cannot be bought, and that sometimes the most powerful force for justice has 4 legs and unwavering loyalty. Harrison Blackwell learned that no amount of money can protect you from the truth. James Rutherford proved that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it. And Titan showed us that heroes come in all forms, sometimes with a badge, a tail, and a nose that can detect not just chemicals, but corruption itself. May we all have the courage of James Rutherford, the loyalty of Titan, and the integrity to stand up for what is right, no matter who stands against us. Because in the end, justice always prevails, especially when it has 4 paws and refuses to give up.